really amusing stories about Queen Elizabeth II's coronation, and they're in Anne Glenconner's book, Lady in Waiting. And anyway, she tells the story very excitedly, and the 6 handmaidens are waiting for the Queen to arrive at Westminster Abbey. And all the handmaidens have been given tiny little vials of smelling salts, which they were to tuck in their gloves, or I suppose it would be down into the palm of their gloves, so that if they were taken over by the vapours because the occasion just overwhelmed them, they could crush these little vials of smelling salts, and I suppose just delicately sniff and come to again. I guess that was the plan. So they're all waiting excitedly, all these 6 gorgeous girls near the entrance to the Abbey, and of course the Archbishop has to come up and say hello to all these 6 gorgeous girls. And so he comes up and he shakes one of the girls' hands very, very vigorously and enthusiastically, and of course it broke the vial of smelling salts. So this horrific stench just spread, and it went all over the Archbishop. And he said, oh my goodness, what have you done? Oh my goodness. And he went off with all his vestments flapping in a big panic. He would be in a panic because you can imagine he got out his hanky and he was trying to get it off, and because the Queen was about to arrive any moment. And that just happened. Well, of course, all the handmaidens were just absolutely hysterically laughing over this Archbishop who just could not cope with what happened.
And she must have told the Queen a funny story, because the Queen just howled with laughter. And it was just, it was a great sequence, actually. And yeah, I'm very proud of that. And of course, the following year when, she just, I mean, you never saw that expression with the Queen. She just laughed out loud like that, It was rare to see that. But when you did see it, you knew you had a great picture, and your old clap of thunder went in your camera. You said, I've got it.
I love that photo you did of the fly past, the diamond fly past. Can you tell us the story about how you worked all that out? Because you worked it out even before, didn't you, where she was going to be standing?
Yeah, fortunately, the Queen was delayed, and the fly past went by, but she wasn't there. There was a hold up. So they had to do it again. So I knew exactly where the planes were coming. And when she stood there, I asked the press secretary, could I stand behind the Queen? And she agreed, and I got this amazing picture. And even though you can't see the Queen's face, it's the Queen.
It's the Queen, definitely.
Another picture in the book where you can't see the Queen's face is Eric Morecambe, a very famous English comedian. They unveiled the Queen unveiled a statue to him in his hometown of Morecambe. And she's unveiling it, and it's a back to the Queen. But looking at the whole picture's about the statue, because the moment you saw the statue, you knew she was smiling because you were smiling, because everybody was smiling.
That's lovely.
But the aeroplanes, that was a super picture. Yeah,
a great shot. And I love the shots too. You got many beautiful shots with Prince Philip. But I just really noticed that you capture that moment where they smile at each other and they're really looking in each other's eyes. And you said a really beautiful quote, and I've just got it written here so I don't muck it up. Special secret of happiness. You felt like they had a special secret of happiness.
That was in Perth, of course, on the last day of the last visit the Queen made to Australia. I think that was 2011. And we knew she was the last time she was going, although it was never announced. And I suspect the Australian people sensed that as well, because the crowds were huge. I mean, Brisbane, they were 30 deep. I remember people were there from early in the morning fainting. People were just waiting so long to see the Queen. And then, of course, Perth, the great barbecue. And of course, the Duke got some flowers for the Queen. Obviously, the Queen couldn't meet everybody. So if the Duke got flowers, he brought them over to the Queen. It was that he gave her the flowers. And she smiled at him and he smiled at her. Now, I've seen that several times, that smile between the two of them. And, I thought that just says everything about that.
Her face just sort of lit up when she looked at him. Yeah. But there was one instance that Queen Elizabeth II actually put that aside, and she really stuck her neck out for the sake of someone she cared about very deeply. And that person was Princess Diana. Now, this was a really young Princess Diana. This is way before she blossomed into the swan that we all knew and loved her for. She was vulnerable. She was newly married. She wasn't that sure of herself. And most importantly, she did not have any contacts in the media at this stage. So there is no suggestion at all that she set up what was about to happen. So Diana was going off into the nearby village of Tetbury, which is just near Highgrove, and she was on a lolly run. Now, she had just fallen pregnant with Prince William, and as all of us that know, in those first few months, lollies really do help that sort of nauseous feeling and give you some energy. And so off she went for some wine gums. And it was a pure innocent excursion. She really didn't expect to see anyone. But there were photographers hiding behind bushes, and paparazzi just besieged her when she went to this lolly shop in the village. So when I say besieged, I mean really besieged, not the Harry and Meghan version of besieged, like it's a Harry Potter premiere. This was really paparazzi hounding her. And she sort of went to escape up one end of the street and got blocked off, and then she went to go the other way and got blocked off, and then she sort of went into the shop in a panic and she was hiding in there, and then she sort of came out and tried to make it to the car, and it was just a nightmare. And it was well documented in the newspapers at the time, and it was clearly distressing. Now, Queen Elizabeth II could see that this was a genuine thing that had unfolded. She also saw how really unfair it was. Now, be aware that now, of course, there's new laws. Now the paparazzi aren't so feral. They're not allowed to do things like that. They're not allowed to get so much in people's face. They're not allowed to impede them where they're going in any direction. There's a lot more laws now. But back then, it was just a wild thing. It was like going out in the jungle every time you encountered the paparazzi. So Queen Elizabeth was concerned enough to summon her private secretary. So Michael Shea was her private secretary, and he was instructed to contact all the editors in Fleet Street, all the major newspapers, including all the tabloids, and to summon them to the palace. Now, editors and tabloid newspaper men had been summoned to the palace before for briefings from the palace. And so they just thought that they were going to get a briefing, maybe a ticking off. They didn't really know what they were going there for, but they did know that they had been summoned by Her Majesty herself. So Michael Shea brought them in, gave them a drink, pleasantries were exchanged, and he more or less asked them to lay off the very young and vulnerable Princess Diana. They thought that what had happened was just over the top and too invasive and quite frightening. Now, Princess Diana didn't even know that this was happening. And Michael Shea made a point of telling all these newspaper men that they were called to the palace not because Princess Diana had requested it, but because the Queen had requested it. Now, sure enough, a very dramatic entrance then happened. Now, it is unheard of for Queen Elizabeth II to attend a briefing of this nature. There is no way. The only other time she did anything similar to it was about 26 years before, when the very young then Prince Charles was actually starting off at school, and she'd had a similar meeting. But 26 years had passed before she'd intervened about anyone that she loved. So in Queen Elizabeth II walks, much to the shock of all the hardened newspaper men in the room, and she was on the arm of Prince Andrew. Now, be aware, back then, Prince Andrew was a dashing naval hero, and all the tabloids and the newspapers just absolutely adored him and couldn't get enough of him. So it had a lot of impact when that little duo walked into the room. Now, Tina Brown tells us about this moment in the Diana Chronicles, but I have since also checked it in many other books. James Whittaker, Diana versus Charles. Also this brilliant book, Diana, Story of a Princess by Tim Clayton and Phil Craig. They are fine writers, awesome researchers, and I was able to verify all of this and this occasion, and they all, like I said, concur with each other. Then, in an unprecedented move for a sovereign who believes in never complaining or explaining, and to the astonishment of the assembled editorial eminences, in came the Queen, escorted by her younger son, Prince Andrew, popular at the time as a dashing naval pilot. Now, monarch and prince moved deftly from group to group, distributing cordiality to everyone present. And she's saying that so snowed were the assembled press that they didn't dare sort of raise any questions, or, they were just being on their best behaviour with the Queen in the room. So none of the newshounds brought up the privacy question until a News of the World journalist, Barry Askew, well, why doesn't that surprise me? News of the World journalist says he bucked etiquette by speaking to the monarch head on. If Lady Di wants to buy some wine gums without being photographed, he growled, why doesn't she send a servant? Whereupon Her Majesty fixed her rather steely gaze on this upstart and said, what an extremely pompous man you are, replied the monarch with a smile. I arrived back at the palace to find Lilibet's wedding preparations underway. Lilibet was very happy now, and happiness, as it so often does, transfigured her. She was sweet and thoughtful of me, happy and thrilled that I'd got married first. I remember how she came laughing into my room one day, and I showed her an American paper someone had sent me. Governess beats Liz to the altar, said the headline. We got a lot of amusement out of that, as no one in the palace had ever given the princess that particular nickname. Lilibet was immensely touched by the way her romance seemed to appeal to the world in general. Letters and telegrams came from every kind of place and person. I think it was the first time she realised just how much people loved her, who had actually never met her in real life, and just what it was that she stood for. One day, Lilibet asked me as the wedding presents were pouring in, Crawfie, what have you done with George all this time? I told her George was still in Scotland, unable to make any plans until we knew what was to happen to me. But Crawfie, he must come to my wedding, Lilibet said, and promptly saw to it that George had an invitation. Charles Brownworth tells a really beautiful story in this book, and it's all about when Queen Elizabeth II actually married Prince Philip, and her father, King George VI, actually walked her up the aisle. Now, a few days after the wedding, when she was on her honeymoon at Balmoral, she received a letter from her dad, and it said this: I was so proud of you and thrilled at having you so close to me on our long walk in Westminster Abbey. But when I handed your hand to the Archbishop, I felt that I had lost something very precious. You were so calm and composed during the service and said your words with such conviction that I knew everything was all right. And that beautiful sentiment was actually shared with Queen Elizabeth II with Charles Brownworth at a later date, because she said that feeling that everything is all right was something that she always tried to deliver to everyone in the United Kingdom. She said, although change is always there and people are always going to be unsettled and they're going to be pushed and pulled from pillar to post, she said, I am there as a constant, always the same, so that they can feel everything is going to be all right. And I think she achieved that in her 70 long years of reign. I think she did achieve that.